Professor Quillnax adjusted his ceremonial teaching robes for the third time that morning, admiring his reflection in the polished surface of his desk. The deep purple fabric, adorned with golden academic insignia, practically screamed intellectual superiority. And why shouldn't it? He was, after all, the most distinguished professor of primitive species physiology at the Galactic University. Attention, class. His voice boomed across the lecture hall, causing several students to jump in their seats. Today, we continue our fascinating study of how lesser species foolishly attempt to compensate for their obvious biological shortcomings. The classroom was a sight to behold. Towering Krillian students with their crystalline exoskeletons sat next to sleek Vortac delegates, their metal-enhanced limbs gleaming under the artificial lights. A group of gaseous nebulans hovered in their containment suits near the back, while the insectoid Zephyrians clicked their mandibles in what passed for polite attention. Now then, Quillnax continued, his three eyes scanning the room with obvious pride, who can tell me why the Terran species, commonly known as humans, represents the perfect example of evolutionary stagnation? A Krillian student raised one of her forearms. Professor, isn't it because they lack any meaningful physical adaptations? No enhanced strength, no natural armor, no energy manipulation abilities. Excellent, Krissa. Quillnax's chest swelled with satisfaction. Indeed, humans are perhaps the most pathetically average species we've encountered. They possess no natural weapons. Their lifespan is laughably short. Their physical capabilities are so unremarkable that they barely qualify as sentient. The class erupted in what could generously be called laughter, though it sounded more like a symphony of grinding metal, chittering mandibles, and electronic beeps. Furthermore, the professor continued, warming to his favorite topic, their homeworld is so hostile that any civilized species would consider it a death trap. Yet somehow these primitive creatures have convinced themselves they're worthy of joining galactic society. A Vortac student's mechanical voice crackled through his vocal synthesizer. Professor Quillnax, surely their technology compensates for their biological inadequacies? Metalese, an astute observation. Quillnax's third eye actually winked with amusement. But here's the delicious irony. Their technology is crude, inefficient, and based on combustion and chemical reactions. It's like watching a child play with fire sticks while the adults use plasma torches. The professor activated his holographic display, showing various species' physical capabilities in colorful charts and graphs. Notice how every civilized species exceeds human baselines in strength, speed, durability, and sensory perception. Humans, by comparison, are so mediocre they wouldn't survive 5 minutes on any world except their own atmospheric nightmare. Just then, the classroom door chimed with an incoming message. Quillnax's personal communicator buzzed against his chest. "One moment, class." He activated the device with an air of importance. The message was from Dean Thoraxis herself. Quillnax's expression shifted from smug confidence to barely concealed horror as he read, "Professor Quillnax, effective immediately, 3 human students have been admitted to your primitive species physiology course as part of the new interspecies exchange program. They will arrive this afternoon for your practical demonstration class. Please ensure they receive the same rigorous education as your other students." Signed, Dean Thoraxis. The communicator nearly slipped from Quillnax's suddenly trembling hands. The classroom fell silent as his 3 eyes widened in what could only be described as existential dread. "Professor?" Chris's voice cut through the silence. "Is everything all right? You look like you've seen a void wraith." Quillnax cleared his throat, his mind racing faster than a Zephyrian in full flight. This was either a cosmic joke or the perfect opportunity he'd been waiting for his entire career. "Class," he announced, his voice regaining its authoritative tone, "it appears the universe has decided to provide us with living specimens for our studies. 3 actual humans will be joining us this afternoon." The reaction was immediate and electric. Students leaned forward in their seats, mandibles clicking with excitement, mechanical joints whirring with anticipation. Now. Quillnax held up his hands, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I know you're all eager to observe these creatures in person, but Remember your scientific objectivity. These humans will serve as perfect examples of everything we've been discussing: their limitations, their weaknesses, their complete inability to compete with truly evolved species. His confidence was returning in waves. In fact, I believe this presents us with an unprecedented opportunity. We can conduct live demonstrations of human inadequacy right here in our classroom. Think of the research papers we'll publish. Think of the academic recognition. The bell chimed, signaling the end of the period. But none of the students moved to leave. "Patience, my eager scholars," Quillnax practically purred. "Return this afternoon and prepare to witness the most comprehensive demonstration of species inferiority in academic history. These humans have no idea what they're walking into." As the students filed out, chattering excitedly in their various languages, Quillnax began planning his afternoon lessons. This was going to be the best day of his academic career. The afternoon session began with an unusual tension in the air. Every seat in the lecture hall was occupied, and Quillnax noticed several students from other classes had somehow squeezed in. Word had spread fast through the university's gossip networks. "Settle down, everyone," Quillnax commanded, though he could barely contain his own excitement. The primitive specimens should arrive any moment now. The classroom door slid open with a soft hiss, and 3 figures stepped inside. The reaction was immediate. "By the 7 moons," whispered Krissa, her crystalline form actually dimming with what could only be described as terror. "Those are actual Deathworlders." The humans looked ordinary, disappointingly ordinary, in Quillnax's opinion. The first one, a female with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, carried herself with quiet confidence. The second, a tall male with broad shoulders, seemed to be taking in every detail of the room with calculating eyes. The third, another female with shorter hair and calloused hands, looked like she was fighting back a smile. "Greetings, Professor Quillnax," the first human said, her voice steady and clear. "I'm Maya Torres. These are my colleagues, Jake Morrison and Elena Vasquez. We're honored to join your class." "Honored." Quillnax's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. The human actually sounded sincere, which somehow made this even more insulting. "Yes, well," he cleared his throat. "Welcome to Advanced Primitive Species Physiology. I do hope you can keep up with the intellectual rigor required for this course." Jake Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly. "We'll do our best, Professor." The alien students were whispering frantically among themselves. Quillnax caught fragments of their conversations. "Look how small they are. Where's their natural armor? How did they even survive space travel?" "Quiet," Quillnax snapped. "Now then, humans. Before we begin today's lesson, I believe a practical demonstration would be educational. For everyone's benefit, of course." Elena Vasquez tilted her head. "What kind of demonstration, Professor?" "Oh, nothing too strenuous," Quillnax replied with false concern. "Just a simple strength assessment, purely for academic purposes. You understand? We need to establish a baseline for your species' capabilities." He gestured toward a massive testing apparatus in the corner of the room. The Galactic Standard Strength Evaluator stood nearly 3 meters tall, its metal framework gleaming under the lights. Various alien students had used it throughout the semester, with Acrylian students barely managing to register on its lowest settings. "This device measures grip strength using standardized galactic units," Quillnax explained, his voice dripping with mock helpfulness. "The current class record is held by Metalise here, at 47 GCUs. Most civilized species average between 30 and 50. Metallice's mechanical head swiveled toward the humans. "No offense intended, but I doubt organic beings from a primitive world could achieve even 20 GCUs. "None taken," Maya replied cheerfully. "Mind if I give it a try?" Quillnax's smile could have powered a small starship. "By all means. Class, please observe carefully. This will serve as an excellent baseline for human physical limitations." The alien students leaned forward in their seats, some recording the moment on their personal devices. A few Nebulans actually descended from their usual hovering positions to get a better view. Maya approached the machine with casual confidence, rolling her shoulders once before gripping the testing bars. The device hummed to life, its sensors calibrating to her biological readings. "Whenever you're ready, Miss Torres," Quillnax announced, practically vibrating with anticipation. "Don't strain yourself. We wouldn't want any injuries on your first day." Maya glanced back at her human companions. Jake gave her an almost imperceptible nod. Elena was definitely fighting back a grin. "Here goes nothing," Maya said and squeezed. The machine's display flickered to life, numbers climbing steadily upward. 20 GCUs. 30, 40. The alien student's chatter died completely as the reading passed Metallis's record of 47. 50, 60. 70. That's impossible," Krissa whispered, her crystalline form flashing with distress patterns. The numbers kept climbing. 80, 90. Quillnax stared at the display, his three eyes refusing to accept what they were seeing. There must be a malfunction. The machine is clearly 100 GCUs. The reading stabilized, holding steady at a number that shouldn't exist. Maya released her grip and stepped back, brushing her hands together casually. "How was that, Professor?" The classroom erupted into stunned silence. Not the kind of silence that follows a good joke, but the absolute quiet that occurs when fundamental beliefs about reality are shattered with a hammer. 100. Jake read aloud from the display, his voice carrying just a hint of amusement. "Is that good?" Quillnax's mouth opened and closed several times before any sound emerged. "The machine, it must be calibrated incorrectly. This reading is clearly erroneous." "Actually, Professor," Metallis's mechanical voice cut through the tension, "I calibrated that device myself this morning. It's functioning perfectly." "Then there's obviously some kind of primitive compensation happening." Quillnax's voice rose to a near shriek. "Humans must use crude brute force techniques that bypass proper biomechanical efficiency. It's not true strength. It's just barbaric muscle application." Elena Vasquez finally let her smile show. "Would you like to test our endurance next, Professor? Since we're apparently so primitive and all." Endurance. Quillnax seized on the word like a drowning Nebulan grabbing a gas canister. "Yes, endurance is where civilized species truly excel. Our advanced cardiovascular systems, our optimized oxygen processing, our superior metabolic efficiency." He practically sprinted to another testing station, a combination treadmill and breathing apparatus. This device measures sustained physical output over extended periods. The current record is held by our Zepyrian students at 23 minutes of continuous operation. A Zepyrian near the front clicked his mandibles proudly. "My species evolved for sustained flight. We are naturally built for endurance activities." Exactly. Quillnax's confidence was rebuilding itself like a house of cards in a hurricane. Humans, with their inefficient bipedal locomotion and primitive lung capacity, should struggle to maintain even 10 minutes of activity. Jake stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "Mind if I give it a shot?" "Please, by all means." Quillnax was practically bouncing on his feet. "Class, observe how quickly this primitive metabolism fails under sustained pressure." Jake stepped onto the machine, adjusting the various sensors and breathing apparatus with practiced ease. The device hummed to life, immediately setting a challenging pace that had left previous alien students gasping within minutes. "Comfortable pace to start," Jake commented conversationally, beginning what looked like an easy jog. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The alien students began shifting uncomfortably in their seats. 15 minutes. Jake was still maintaining the same steady rhythm, his breathing barely elevated. He looked like he was out for a casual morning run. 20 minutes. The Zepyrian who held the previous record was clicking his mandibles in distress. "This is impossible," Quillnax muttered, his three eyes fixed on the timer. "Human physiology can't sustain this level of activity. They don't have the necessary adaptations." 25 minutes. Jake looked over at his human companions and actually smiled. "Want to make this interesting?" he called out, and somehow increased his pace. The machine's sensors began flashing warning lights, indicating stress levels that should have been fatal to most species. Jake's vital signs remained steady. Almost bored. 30 minutes. 35. 40. Professor Chris's voice was barely a whisper. How is he still running? Quilnax couldn't answer. His entire academic career, his life's work, his fundamental understanding of biology was collapsing faster than a Nebulan's gas containment suit in vacuum. At 45 minutes, Jake finally slowed to a stop, not because he was exhausted, but because he was clearly getting bored. "Good warm-up," he announced, stepping off the machine. "What's next, Professor?" Quilnax's worldview wasn't just cracking anymore. It was lying in pieces around his feet. And somehow, the humans hadn't even broken a sweat. Wait just a moment." Quilnax's voice cracked with desperation. "Physical strength and endurance are crude measurements. What about pain tolerance? Surely these soft, unarmored creatures can't match species with proper defensive adaptations." He rushed to yet another testing station, this one bristling with electrodes and neurofeedback sensors. The Neurological Stress Tolerance Evaluator was his pride and joy. This device administers carefully calibrated neural stimulation. It measures pain threshold, stress response, and cognitive function under duress. The highest score belongs to our Kryllian students, naturally due to their crystalline nervous systems. Elena stepped forward before he could even ask. "Let me guess, Professor. You want to see how quickly the primitive human breaks down under pressure?" "Precisely." Quilnax's confidence flickered back to life. "Your species lacks proper pain management evolution. This should demonstrate the clear superiority of advanced neural architecture." Elena settled into the testing chair with the same casual confidence her companions had shown. "Fire it up, Professor." The machine hummed ominously as it began its calibration sequence. Level 1 was designed to be mildly uncomfortable. Level 5 typically caused most species to request immediate cessation. Level 10 was considered the theoretical maximum for conscious beings. Elena sat through Level 5 without blinking. At Level 8, she yawned. "Interesting sensation," she commented conversationally. "Kind of tingly. Is this supposed to hurt?" The alien students were now openly staring in horror. Chris's form had dimmed to barely visible levels of terror. "Level 10. Quilnax whispered, his hands shaking as he activated the maximum setting. Elena tilted her head thoughtfully. "Feels like a mild headache. Got anything stronger?" That's the maximum the machine can produce." Metallis's synthesized voice was barely audible. "Oh well." Elena shrugged, standing up from the chair. "What's next?" Quilnax was breathing heavily now, his 3 eyes darting frantically around the room. "Reaction time." "Yes, reaction time. Surely your primitive nervous system can't compete with cybernetically enhanced reflexes." He activated the neural response grid, a holographic testing system that measured reaction speed down to microseconds. Metallis here holds the current record at 0.03 seconds response time, thanks to his mechanical neural implants. Jake stepped up to the testing zone. "How does this work?" "Random visual and auditory stimuli will appear throughout the grid. You must respond by touching each stimulus as it appears. The faster your response, the higher your score." The test began. Lights flashed. Sounds chirped. Jake's hands moved in a blur that seemed to defy physics. His responses weren't just fast. They were predictive, as if he could anticipate where the next stimulus would appear. Final score: 0.017 seconds average response time. Metallis's mechanical head rotated a full 360 degrees in what could only be described as a cybernetic nervous breakdown. "That's impossible," Quilnax shrieked. "Organic neural pathways can't transmit signals that fast. It violates basic biology." "Maybe your basic biology needs updating," Maya suggested helpfully. "Fine." Quilnax was practically foaming at the mouth now. Problem solving. Complex logical reasoning. This is where true intelligence separates advanced species from primitive ones. He activated the final testing station, a complex 3-dimensional puzzle that required advanced mathematical reasoning, spatial intelligence, and logical deduction. This puzzle has stumped some of our most brilliant students. It requires sophisticated thinking that only comes from millions of years of proper evolution. The puzzle materialized as a floating holographic construct of interlocking geometric shapes, mathematical equations, and logical sequence patterns that hurt to look at directly. Elena, Maya, and Jake gathered around it, studying the problem for exactly 12 seconds. Oh, it's a fourth-dimensional Klein bottle transformation, Maya said casually. With a Fibonacci sequence modulation, Jake added. And the geometric progression follows a modified golden ratio spiral, Elena concluded. They reached out in perfect synchronization, their hands moving through the holographic puzzle with fluid precision. The solution unfolded in ways that made several alien students physically ill to watch. Completion time, 47 seconds. The previous record, held by a team of 5 advanced AI-assisted Vortex students, was 4 hours and 23 minutes. The classroom fell into the kind of silence usually reserved for funeral services. This can't be happening, Quillnax whispered, staring at the completed puzzle. This is all wrong. Everything I know, everything I've taught, everything I've built my career on. A Nebulan student's voice drifted through his containment suit speaker. Professor, are we sure these are the primitive ones? Another student clicked nervously. Maybe we should ask them to teach the class. Quillnax's 3 eyes rolled back in his head, and for a moment it looked like he might actually faint.
No.
No. There has to be something, one final test, one last demonstration of their obvious inferiority. His hands shook as he activated the most advanced system in the room, the Galactic Combat Simulation Array. The massive holographic projector descended from the ceiling, casting the entire classroom in an eerie blue glow. This, he announced, his voice echoing with desperate authority, is the ultimate test of species capability. A multidimensional combat scenario designed by the greatest military minds in the galaxy. The alien students perked up with interest. Even they had heard legends of the combat array, a simulation so complex and brutal that entire military academies used it to train their elite forces. The scenario is simple, Quillnax continued, his confidence returning as he explained the impossible challenge. 3 participants must survive and complete objectives in a simulated environment populated by the most dangerous creatures and situations known to galactic civilization. The AI adapts in real time, learning from every decision and counter-strategy. He gestured wildly at the holographic controls. No team has ever completed this simulation on their first attempt. Most take months of training just to survive the opening sequence. The record completion time is held by a squad of enhanced Vortex super soldiers, 6 hours and 41 minutes. Maya, Jake, and Elena exchanged glances that somehow managed to communicate entire conversations. Sounds fun, Maya said simply. Wait, Chris's voice cracked with disbelief. You're going to attempt the impossible scenario? On your first try? Without any preparation? How hard can it be? Jake shrugged. The 3 humans stepped into the simulation field as the environment materialized around them. Immediately, they were surrounded by a hostile alien landscape populated with predatory creatures that had been specifically designed to counter every known combat strategy. What happened next defied every principle of military science that Quillnax had ever studied. Instead of following established tactical doctrine, the humans did something no alien species had ever attempted. They improvised. Constantly. Unpredictably. Chaotically. When faced with a swarm of energy-based predators, Jake didn't use proper defensive formations. Instead, he grabbed a handful of rocks and started throwing them in seemingly random patterns. The AI, designed to counter logical strategies, couldn't predict chaos. When Elena encountered a puzzle lock that required complex mathematical calculations, she didn't run the equations. She kicked the door. It opened. When Maya faced a choice between 3 tactical options, she chose a 4th option that didn't technically exist, confusing the AI so thoroughly that it actually paused to recalculate. This is impossible, Metalise whispered, his mechanical eyes tracking their progress. They're not following any known combat protocols. They're making it up as they go along, a Zephyrian student clicked in amazement. The humans moved through the simulation like a force of nature. Their strategies were so unpredictable that the AI couldn't adapt fast enough. They turned traps into advantages, used environmental hazards as weapons, and somehow made their complete lack of planning into the most effective strategy anyone had ever seen. Completion time, 18 minutes and 37 seconds. The simulation ended with the three humans standing victorious in the middle of a scenario that was supposed to be impossible to complete. The classroom erupted into stunned silence, followed immediately by excited chatter in dozens of different languages. 18 minutes, Quillnax whispered, staring at the timer display. 18 minutes for a scenario that takes trained military professionals over 6 hours. He turned to look at the three humans, who were brushing holographic dust off their clothes with casual indifference. "You're not primitive," he said, his voice barely audible. "You're not inferior. You're not even equal to us." His legs gave out, and he collapsed into his chair. "You're superior. Completely, utterly, impossibly superior. And I've spent my entire career being wrong about everything." The classroom doors burst open as Dean Thoraxis strode in, followed by a contingent of university officials. Their timing was impeccable, arriving just as Quillnax finished his public confession of academic incompetence. "Professor Quillnax." The dean's voice carried the authority of someone who had heard the commotion from 3 floors away. "Dare I ask why half the university is gathered outside your classroom?" Quillnax looked up from his chair, his 3 eyes red with the strain of having his entire worldview demolished in a single afternoon. "Dean Thoraxis, I can explain. The humans, they're not what we thought." "We noticed," Dean Thoraxis replied dryly, gesturing toward the still-glowing simulation array and its impossible completion time. Maya stepped forward with diplomatic grace. "Professor Quillnax has been conducting some very thorough educational demonstrations. We've learned a great deal about galactic academic standards. And we've learned that maybe your textbooks need updating," Elena added helpfully. "Indeed," Jake nodded seriously. "Some of information about human capabilities seems a bit outdated." Quillnax made a sound somewhere between a whimper and a mechanical failure. Dean Thoraxis studied the humans with newfound respect. "Professor Quillnax, effective immediately, you're on administrative leave pending a complete review of your curriculum and teaching methods." "But my career, my reputation, my life's work," Quillnax protested weakly. "Your life's work was apparently fiction," Dean Thoraxis replied without sympathy. She turned to the humans. "Would any of you be interested in a temporary teaching position? It seems we have an opening in the Comparative Species Studies Department." Maya smiled politely. "I'd be honored, Dean Thoraxis." "Excellent. Your first lecture will be next week." "Perfect," Maya replied, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "I think I'll call it Why Underestimating Species is the Most Primitive Mistake of All. Should be educational." Quillnax's final whimper echoed through the classroom as his academic legacy crumbled into dust. 3 days later, the university announced a complete revision of its primitive species curriculum. The old textbooks, the ones that had called humans biologically inadequate and evolutionarily stagnant, were recalled and pulped. In their place, a new course emerged, taught by the very species the galaxy had dismissed for so long. Maya's first lecture was standing room only. Students from every department packed the hall, along with faculty members who claimed to be there for peer review purposes, but were clearly just curious. Even Dean Thoraxis attended, taking notes in the back row. "Good afternoon," Maya began, her voice carrying easily through the hushed room. "I understand that many of you have spent your entire academic careers learning that humans are primitive, weak, and barely worth studying. I'm here today to explain why that perspective is not just wrong, it's dangerously wrong." She activated the holographic display, showing images of human history. "You see, our so-called biological inadequacies aren't weaknesses. They're adaptations. We don't have natural armor because we learned to build better protection. We don't have natural weapons because we learned to create tools that surpass anything biology could produce. Our short lives forced us to innovate faster than any long-lived species could imagine." The alien students listened in stunned silence as Maya walked them through human achievements, landing on our own moon with computers less powerful than their communicators, developing vaccines for diseases that should have wiped us out, building machines that could explore other planets. "You see us as primitive because we don't have telepathy or energy manipulation," Maya continued. "But we develop something perhaps more valuable: resilience. We get knocked down and we get back up. We fail, and we learn. We face impossible odds, and we win. She paused, looking around the room. The simulation you watched us complete in 18 minutes? That wasn't luck. That was the result of thousands of years of learning to survive against enemies stronger, faster, and better equipped than us. We don't fight fair. We fight smart. A Krillian student raised a trembling hand. Professor Torres, what should we call you? How did your species survive when everything on your world was trying to kill you? Maya smiled. That's the thing about Deathworlders, Krissa. We didn't just survive. We thrived. Every predator taught us something. Every disaster made us stronger. Every challenge was an opportunity to adapt. The humans aren't primitive, Medley said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. They're specialized. Specialized for survival against impossible odds. Exactly, Maya nodded. And that's why the Galactic University needs to update its curriculum. Not because humans are superior to other species, but because every species is superior at something. The key to galactic cooperation isn't ranking species by arbitrary metrics. It's learning from each other's strengths. The classroom erupted in applause, actual applause, not the polite clicking or beeping that usually passed for approval among alien species. For the first time, the students seemed to genuinely understand. After the lecture, Dean Thoraxis approached Maya. That was remarkable. I've never seen our students so engaged. Thank you, Dean. But the real work is just beginning. If the galaxy is going to accept humans as equals, we need to change minds everywhere, not just in this classroom. I couldn't agree more. The dean glanced toward the door where Quilnax's former office stood empty. In fact, I've been thinking. The university is planning to open a new research institute focused on interspecies cooperation. We'd like you to head it. Maya's eyes widened. Dean Thoraxis, I'm honored, but... No buts. You've already proven more in one lecture than Quilnax did in his entire career. The position is yours if you want it. Maya looked at Jake and Elena, who were both grinning. I'll need my colleagues with me. Of course. Consider them hired. As the three humans walked out of the lecture hall together, Elena nudged Maya. So, Professor, how does it feel to be the one rewriting the textbooks? Maya laughed. Honestly, it feels like exactly what we came here to do. Far across the galaxy, in a dimly lit office filled with old academic awards, Professor Quilnax sat staring at the termination notice on his communicator. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed. His life's work had been exposed as a lie. But somewhere, in the depths of his three hearts, something unexpected began to grow. Not resentment, curiosity. He pulled up Maya's lecture recording and watched it for the third time. The humans weren't monsters. They weren't primitive. They were just different. And maybe he thought different was something worth studying after all. He picked up his communicator and typed a message to Dean Thoraxis. Request permission to audit Professor Torres's next lecture. I have much to learn. The reply came within minutes. Permission granted. Welcome to the future of education, Professor. Quilnax allowed himself something he hadn't experienced in years, the small, fragile warmth of a new beginning. The galaxy was changing, and for the first time he was ready to change with it. The news of Quilnax's humiliation and the humans' unprecedented demonstration spread across the galactic academic community like wildfire. Within a week, Maya received interview requests from 17 different scientific journals. Within a month, 3 other universities requested human exchange students. Within 2 months, the Galactic Council formally requested a presentation on updated human capability assessments. Dean Thoraxis, sensing an opportunity, threw the university's full resources behind the new research institute. Funding that had once gone to Quilnax's outdated studies was redirected to human-led projects. Laboratories were retrofitted to accommodate Earth-based research methods. Even the cafeteria added a human-friendly section, though the attempts at pizza were, by all accounts, disastrous. Maya, Jake, and Elena worked 18-hour days, 6 days a week, building the institute from the ground up. They recruited faculty from across human space, biologists, engineers, historians, anthropologists, all eager to correct the galaxy's misconceptions about their species. We're not just fighting academic prejudice, Maya told her team during their first staff meeting. We're fighting centuries of assumptions. Every textbook, every lecture, every scientific paper about humans has been written by species who never bothered to ask us for our perspective. That changes now. The Institute's first major project was a comprehensive database of human capabilities, not just physical, but psychological, social, and technological. We're not just tough or resilient, Elena explained to a group of visiting scholars. We're adaptive. Our true strength isn't any single trait. It's our ability to learn, to change, to find solutions that didn't exist before. The scholars, many of whom had come expecting to observe a primitive species, left with their assumptions shattered. One Vortac researcher stayed for an extra week, fascinated by human problem-solving methods. You don't follow established logic trees, he observed. You create new branches. That's not a bug, Jake replied. It's a feature. Quilnax attended his first human-led lecture 6 weeks after his removal. He sat in the back row, hooded robes pulled tight, hoping no one would recognize him. But of course they did. Students whispered. Faculty pointed. Maya, at the front of the room, paused mid-sentence and looked directly at him. Professor Quilnax, she said evenly. Welcome. I hope you're here to learn. The room went silent. Quilnax felt every eye on him. His 3 hearts hammered in his chest. I am, he said, his voice barely audible. I was wrong. About many things. I wish to understand. Maya nodded. Then you're in the right place. Take notes. The lecture that day was on human medical history, how a species with such fragile biology had managed to survive and thrive. Maya walked the students through centuries of innovation, vaccines, antibiotics, sanitation, organ transplants, prosthetics, gene therapy. Every advancement was a response to a challenge, she explained. A plague killed millions. We developed vaccines. A child was born with a failing heart. We learned to replace it. A soldier lost a limb. We built a new one. Humans don't accept limitations. We overcome them. Quilnax took notes furiously. His old lectures had dismissed human medicine as primitive patchwork. Now he saw it for what it was, a relentless, centuries-long campaign against the very concept of impossible. After the lecture, Maya approached him. Well, Quilnax looked up at her, his 3 eyes moist. I have been an academic for 63 years. I have published 47 papers. I have received 19 awards. And I have never seen anything like your species. That's because you are looking at us from the outside, Maya said gently. You measured us against your standards, not our own. No wonder you thought we came up short. Quilnax nodded slowly. I would like to help. If you'll have me. Not as a professor. As a student. Maya considered him for a long moment. Then she extended her hand, a human gesture he had learned to recognize. Welcome to the Institute, Professor. You have a lot of catching up to do. He took her hand. It was warm, alive, human. 3 months later, the Galactic Council's Committee on Species Classification issued a historic ruling. The term primitive species was officially retired from all council documentation, replaced with developing civilization. More importantly, humans were reclassified from Category 4, limited capability, to Category 2, highly adaptive. It wasn't full equality, not yet, but it was a start. And in the halls of the Galactic University, students no longer laughed when humans walked by. Instead, they nodded. They asked questions. They listened. Quilnax became a regular attendee at Maya's lectures. He sat in the front row now, no longer hiding, taking notes with the enthusiasm of a first-year student. His colleagues whispered about his fall from grace, but he didn't care. He was learning more now than he had in 63 years of teaching. The problem with academia, he told Maya one day, is that we become so certain we're right that we stop questioning ourselves. You've taught me that certainty is not a virtue. It's a failure. Maya smiled. That might be the smartest thing anyone's ever said about humans. It is also the smartest thing anyone has ever said about me, Quilnax replied. They laughed together, a human and a Krillian, sitting in a university cafeteria, sharing terrible pizza and the kind of friendship that neither had expected but both cherished. The galaxy was vast and strange and full of surprises. But perhaps the greatest surprise of all was that the primitive species had come not to conquer, not to demand, but to teach. And the galaxy, after centuries of arrogance, was finally ready to learn. The Institute's doors remained open. New students arrived every day from every corner of known space. They came to study humans and left studying themselves. Quillnax published his final paper 6 months later. It was not a research paper. It was an apology, addressed to every student he had ever taught, every species he had ever dismissed, every assumption he had ever failed to question. The paper's title was simple: What I Got Wrong. It became required reading across the university. And in the years that followed, it saved countless students from making the same mistakes. The galaxy was changing. Slowly, painfully, beautifully. And at the center of it all were 3 humans who had walked into a classroom expecting hostility and walked out with the seeds of revolution. A year after Maya's first lecture, the Galactic University held its annual academic symposium. The event was attended by scholars from over 200 species, representing every corner of known space. This year, for the first time, a human was the keynote speaker. Maya stood at the podium, looking out at a sea of alien faces, crystalline Krillians, metal-enhanced vortex, gaseous nebulans in their containment suits, insectoid Zephyrians clicking their mandibles in anticipation. Behind her, Jake and Elena sat with the faculty, alongside Professor Quillnax, who had become a trusted colleague and friend.
"Good morning," Maya began.
1 year ago, I walked into Professor Quillnax's classroom as a student. I walked out as something else. A teacher, a researcher, a friend, but most importantly, a witness. She paused, letting the words settle. I witnessed a room full of bright, curious students who had been taught that my species was inferior, not through malice, but through ignorance. I witnessed a professor who had spent his entire career building a worldview that was wrong, but who had the courage to admit it. And I witnessed something I will never forget: the moment when learning triumphed over arrogance. The audience was silent. Even the nebulans stopped their usual hovering. Today, I'm not here to celebrate human achievement. I'm here to celebrate yours. Because the students in this room, the scholars, the researchers, the teachers, you are the ones who chose to listen. You chose to question your assumptions. You chose to learn. Maya gestured to Quillnax, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Professor Quillnax has asked me to share something with you. A few months ago, he wrote a paper titled What I Got Wrong. It was an apology to every student he had misled, every species he had dismissed, every question he had failed to ask.
She paused.
But he also wrote something else. Something he asked me to read today at this symposium. May I? Quillnax nodded, his 3 eyes glistening. Maya pulled out a datapad and read, I believed that intelligence meant certainty. I believed that knowledge meant never being wrong.
I was wrong about that, too.
True intelligence is not the absence of mistakes. It is the ability to recognize them. True knowledge is not the accumulation of facts. It is the willingness to revise them. The humans did not defeat me with their strength or their endurance or their speed. They defeated me with their humility. They walked into my classroom expecting to be dismissed, and they stayed to teach. I have never been more grateful for a lesson. The applause that followed was unlike anything the university had ever heard. Not polite clicking. Not mechanical beeps. Genuine, heartfelt, thunderous approval. Quillnax buried his face in his hands. Beside him, Krissa placed a crystalline hand on his shoulder. You did good, Professor, she whispered. You did good. After the symposium, Maya found Quillnax sitting alone in the old lecture hall, the same room where it had all begun. He was staring at the holographic display, still showing the simulation results from that fateful day. Mind if I join you? Maya asked. Please. She sat beside him. For a long moment, neither spoke. You know, Quillnax said finally, I used to think that this room was my greatest achievement. My lectures, my research, my legacy. Now I see it differently. This room is where my failure lived, and I walked past it every day, never noticing. That's not failure, Maya said. That's being human, or being alive. We all have blind spots. The question is whether we're willing to see them when someone points them out. Quillnax nodded slowly. You have given me something I never thought I would have, Maya Torres. A second chance. Use it well. He smiled, a strange expression on a Krillian face, but unmistakably genuine. I intend to. The Institute flourished. New research centers opened across the galaxy, each one dedicated to cross-species collaboration. Human scientists worked alongside Vortac engineers, Krillian biologists, Superian chemists. They solved problems that had seemed impossible. They discovered things that had been hidden for millennia. And they did it together, not despite their differences, but because of them. Maya retired as director after 10 years. She returned to Earth, to a small house by the sea, where she grew vegetables and watched the stars. But she never stopped teaching. Students came to her from across the galaxy, sitting in her garden, asking questions, learning. She welcomed them all. Jake became the university's first human dean. Elena started a program that sent human athletes to train with alien species, and vice versa. The exchange was, by all accounts, transformative. Quillnax taught until his final day. His lectures were no longer about primitive species. They were about the dangers of certainty, the value of humility, and the joy of learning something new. When he died, the university renamed the old lecture hall in his honor, the Quillnax Auditorium, a place where students came to question everything, including themselves. And on the wall, just above the podium, a plaque was installed. It read, "Here, a professor learned that he was wrong. Here, 3 humans taught him that being wrong was the beginning of wisdom. Let all who enter remember. Certainty is not a virtue. Curiosity is." The galaxy continued to turn. New challenges arose. New misunderstandings emerged. But the seeds planted in that classroom, on that fateful afternoon, had taken root. And they would not be easily uprooted. Because somewhere, in the hearts of those who had been there, the lesson remained. No species is primitive. No knowledge is complete. And the greatest teacher is the willingness to listen. The stars watched. The galaxy learned. And the humans, once dismissed, once underestimated, kept teaching. Not because they were superior, because they were willing to try. And that, in the end, was the only superiority that mattered. 20 years after that first lecture, the Galactic University held a reunion. Students from that original class returned from across the galaxy, some as renowned researchers, others as diplomats, teachers, explorers. They gathered in the Quillnax Auditorium, now filled with holographic displays of their accomplishments. Krissa, the Krillian student who had once dimmed with terror at the sight of humans, had become the university's leading xenobiologist. Her research on human-Krillian physiological parallels had won 3 Galactic Science Awards. She stood at the podium and told a story. I remember the day the humans walked into our classroom. I remember thinking they looked so small, so fragile, so primitive. I was wrong. Not because they proved me wrong, though they did, but because I had forgotten something fundamental. Every species is primitive to someone. Every civilization is young to someone else. The measure of intelligence is not how much you know. It is how willing you are to learn. The audience applauded. Krissa stepped down and embraced Maya, Jake, and Elena, who had returned for the reunion, gray-haired now, but still sharp-eyed and warm. You look old, Krissa said to Maya. I am old, Maya replied with a laugh. Humans do that. We should fix that. Maybe next century. I'm busy right now. Metalise, now a senior AI ethics advisor to the Galactic Council, approached Jake. I have a question. After all these years, I still don't understand one thing. What's that? When you threw those rocks at the simulation, the energy predators, was that strategy? Or was it just chaos? Jake grinned. Yes. Metallis's processor's word for a moment. Then he laughed, a sound he had learned from humans, one that his mechanical voice box had never been designed to produce. I still don't understand. That's okay, Jake said. Neither do we. That's the fun part. The reunion continued late into the night. Old friends shared stories. New collaborations were formed, and somewhere, in the quiet corners of the auditorium, a holographic display cycled through images of that first day, the stunned faces of the alien students, the impossible readings on the strength evaluator, the simulation completion time that had shattered every record. Above them all, the plaque glowed softly. Certainty is not a virtue. Curiosity is. Maya returned to Earth the next day. She sat in her garden, watching the sunset, her old bones aching but her heart full. Jake called from the spaceport. Elena from her lab. They talked for an hour about nothing and everything. The galaxy's different now, Jake said. Is it? Maya asked. Maybe not, but we are. And that's enough. Maya smiled. That's always been enough. She closed her eyes and listened to the waves. Somewhere out there, students were still learning.
Teachers were still teaching.
Species that had once been enemies were now colleagues. And it had all started with 3 humans who walked into a classroom and refused to be dismissed. The stars watched. The galaxy turned. And Maya Torres, former student, former teacher, former director, felt something she hadn't felt in years.
Peace.
Not the peace of stillness. The peace of purpose fulfilled. She opened her eyes. The sun had set. The first stars were appearing. She looked up at them. The same stars that had watched humanity's first steps, its greatest failures, its most improbable triumphs. Still here, she whispered. Still learning. Still surprising you. The stars did not answer. They never did. But somehow Maya thought they seemed a little brighter tonight. She went inside, made tea, and began planning her next lesson. Because the work was never done. And that, more than any strength, any endurance, any simulation record, was the most human thing of all. The galaxy had learned to listen. Now it was time to learn to ask. And Maya, Jake, and Elena would be there to help. Not because they had to.
Because they wanted to.
That was the difference. That was everything.